Today, a primary desire of mine is to invite you to let yourself off the hook. I use that phrase a lot. If you've ever taken my, not mine, I've facilitated it. It's actually my mentor's. But if you've ever taken the mental muscle program with me, one of the things that comes up quite frequently in that program is me inviting the participants to let themselves off the hook. Because boy, can we beat ourselves up about stuff, can't we? I've beat myself up a lot in my life. And I chose at a point to not do it anymore. To let go of it. To let go of the idea that there was ever a requirement for me to beat myself up in the first place. So have you ever had a time in your life? This is a rhetorical question. As Reverend William likes to say, it's a Jay-Z question. Have you ever had times in your life when outer appearances stagnate, but something within is profoundly different? I just want you to think about that. Everything out there seems to be like, nothing is moving, nothing is shifting, nothing is growing. It feels like that's not happening, but there's something inherent right within that feels profoundly different. What I'm going to offer is this idea. That when you have had that experience, and I believe, you get to decide what you believe, but I believe that everyone has had that experience at some point or another in their life. Some people might be having that experience right now. But that moment of recognition that there's something profoundly different within you is what we are talking about when I say remember who you are. That is remembering who you are. To remember in that instance, you are strength. You are the embodiment and expression of strength, of divine strength itself, because that is a faculty of divinity itself, and you are divine. You remember in that moment that the circumstances are just a story. It's just a story, but it's not the whole story. Sometimes I think when we look at the circumstances of our life and we begin to, align ourselves with thinking that they have any dominance or power or anything against us or even for us, when we begin to put reliance on the circumstances of our life, we have forgotten that in it all, Spirit, God, the source, the infinite resource of all that is, the creative nature itself has never left. Even though we may have perceived it to have left. It can never leave you. One of the things that I loved, I always say this is, I think, coined by Eric Butterworth, but most ministers are saying this. You can never be more spiritual than you are right now. You can never be more spiritual than you are right in this moment. Do you want to know why we ministers can make that claim about you? You want to know? Good luck. No, I'm just kidding. No, because here's the thing. The wholeness of you, your physical presence, your energetic presence, your conscious presence, it is 100% spirit itself. There is no aspect of you that is not divine. So you can never be more spiritual than you are right in this moment. It is impossible. It is impossible. Spirit has never left. Spirit itself is your identity. You are divine. You are the expression of divinity itself. You are God. People get weird when I say that, right? Some people get weird. People in this community, I think, are getting used to it. Because here's what I always say. To make the claim, I am God, or you are God, or we are God, is not saying that we are in a hierarchical structure where we are above. No, what I'm saying is that if we understand it, it becomes the great equalizer. Because if I claim that about myself, I must understand it and acknowledge it for every single person I encounter. Because we are all one unified wholeness. That is a function and expression and basis of the unity movement. We are one unified wholeness. And so let go of those things that seem heavy in the circumstantial life because they do not define you. What defines you is the truth of your identity, which is God itself. That's why I'm saying I'm letting you off the hook. I'm letting you off the hook because we all forget sometimes. Well, I used to forget all the time, not so much anymore. But we forget sometimes in the experiences of disappointment our divine identity. We forget sometimes in the experiences of grief our divine identity. We forget sometimes in the experiences of fear our divine identity. I'll tell you what, I forget sometimes when the world seems too loud my divine identity. The world is really loud right now. We forget when we conflate the appearance of the world with the infinite spiritual truth, our divine identity. Especially if the appearance of the world seems contrary to a divine resource playing itself out. The thing is, whether we call it good or we call it bad, it's all divinity itself. It's all goodness. The challenge is sometimes that goodness is used for destructive purposes by not any of us, right? No. But there are people who use this power of creation in destructive ways. I'm over it. And I will not let that define my experience of this world any longer. This is what it is to awaken for me. Awakening is a sacred interruption. It is a sacred interruption. It invites us to stop for a minute, to look again, and to see the depth, to see the spiritual truth behind every experience, behind every circumstance. That is how we define healing in this philosophy. To see the divinity, we talk about it every week with the candle. Healing is our capacity to see the divinity at the core of all experiences, to see the God essence at the core of all that is, to let go of the judgments of good or bad and see that it is all God, no exceptions, because there can be nothing separate from the infinite. So awakening is not about acquiring the truth. Think about that. Awakening is not about acquiring the truth. It is about uncovering it within ourselves. We are not empty vessels trying to become spiritual. Our source, our nature, the fundamental premise of who we are is already whole. Now, we can look at places in our lives where we feel disjointed, where we don't feel whole. And the only way that will affect us adversely is if we allow ourselves to be defined by those ideas. The spiritual journey, I am tired of saying I'm going on the spiritual journey to find my sense of wholeness. No, you are already whole. The spiritual journey is uncovering that wholeness from within. It is not a journey towards worthiness. It's a journey back to awareness. That's what the spiritual journey is all about. You are worthy because you exist. I want you to really hear that. You are worthy because you exist, not because any outside circumstance has proved to you that you are worthy. It is not because anybody else out there has ever said you are worthy. You are worthy because you exist. Can you accept that today? And the rest of you? That's what it is to remember who you are. When you remember who you are, here's what happens. You stop arguing for your limitations, and you begin standing in the realm of infinite possibility. Because when you know who you are, how can you believe that there are any limitations? I have a parable. Ooh, he has a parable. A traveler stood at a large closed gate, looked at the gate and said, "Oh, I cannot pass. The gate looks to be locked. It looks too heavy. The path is too steep, and I am too weary." And they remained there for hours and hours. staring at the gate. And as they observed the gate, they became more certain with each passing moment that they were right in their assessment, that it looked locked, just too heavy to pass, it's too steep, I'm too weary. They became more and more convinced as they stood there. The traveler would sometimes say, "Why should I reach for what will not open? I have learned what is possible for me." Another traveler came along and asked, "Why do you speak to the gate as if it is listening?" And the reply was this: "I am not speaking to the gate, I am speaking the truth." The other traveler said, "Perhaps, but it is possible that you've spoken so often of why you cannot move the gate that you've forgotten to ask whether the gate is even locked." Hearing this, the first traveler reached out, touched the gate. It opened at once, and the realization came clear. The traveler had mistaken their argument for limitation as truth, and it became a prison. If you have ever felt pulled down by conditions, by expectations, by heartbreak, by history, or by collective fear, this message today does not deny that weight. It is simply a reminder that it is not the permanent truth. Because one of the things I also want to make sure is clear today is that we do not confuse spirituality and the spiritual path with avoidance. What do we call that? Spiritual bypass, right? We are not here to avoid the idea that circumstances are happening in our lives. Are circumstances happening in all of our lives? Circumstances are happening in my life. I am in the midst of circumstances and experiences every single day. How about you? But my choice, and it is a choice, my choice is to approach the circumstances now. And I had to learn this. My choice is to approach those circumstances with optimism. Now, optimism is not spiritual bypass. It is not pretending everything is fine. It is the spiritual capacity to see beyond current difficulties, not denying they exist, but denying that they have power. That's what spiritual optimism is all about. And it takes practice. The practice can be a joyful thing. You know, I often say, I used to talk about the work of new thought, and we're in this for the work, right? And everybody would say, why do you have to keep saying work? Work does not have to be toil. Work can be joyful. I am joyful in my daily experience of work. Well, I mean, I get to come here every day, so what could be more joyful than that? I mean, seriously, if you want to see a joyful work experience, come hang out with Sherry and Tyler and I someday. We have a great time here. Spiritual optimism does not invite us to ignore the darkness. It does not invite us to ignore the darkness. It invites us to face every moment with honesty and with a deep trust in what can emerge. We are, I said last week or 2 weeks ago, that and again, I did not coin this, just to be very clear, but we live in the realm of the possible, right? And so we could essentially call ourselves possibilitarians. And if we're in this together as a collective wholeness, which we are, by the way, none of us is in this alone, some of the best work we can do is to gracefully and lovingly remind each other of who we are. It is not uncommon for me to get up here on a Sunday morning, and some of the first things I say is, I look out and what I see is the face of God. I see the expression of the divine in every single face I encounter. And then sometimes I say, take a look around you. Look at the face of God all around you. Do it. Go ahead. Look around you. If you're online, you're watching in Starbucks, look around you. The face of God exists right where you are. Community is an opportunity to build resilience. It is an opportunity to build strength. Community can help us bear witness to the challenges in our life and allow us to see the light. Because you know what? A few weeks ago, we were joking, and I would say, remember who you are, and if you ever forget, I'm here to remind you. I'm not the only one who is here to remind you. You get to remind each other. You get to remind each other. You get to remind everyone beyond these walls. And it doesn't have to be this explicit. You are God. Trust me. If you go out there and you start telling people, you are God, they're going to look at you a little funny. But you can know it in your mind, and you can affirm their divine capacities and qualities right to them. You are a magnificent, loving presence, and I am so grateful for you in my life. That is acknowledging someone's divinity. You are innate strength. That's what I understand to be true of you. Right? That is how we can bear witness to the expression of humanity as divinity itself. So I want you to reflect for a moment. Take a breath and just reflect for a moment. Consider for a moment what comes up in relationship to these questions. Where have I forgotten who I am in my life? That is not the end. What condition have I treated as final that may only be temporary? That is not the end. What truth about me is trying to rise into greater expression? Who around me needs support to remember their light? What would it mean to use this analogy? That I defy gravity. Never forget, we are more than our conditions. We have not reached the end of the story. We are unwritten. We have not reached the end of the story because the story never ends. The story goes on. And every moment is a blank page that you get to write. You may not control every condition in your life. You may not control every condition in your life, but you can remember who you are in the midst of every condition. And that is the promise of New Thought. That is the promise of this philosophy. No matter what, you can remember your divine identity. So let us stop announcing our conditions like they are sacred truth. Let us stop rehearsing the story of impossibility, why something can't happen. Because when the argument falls apart, here's what happens. Possibility walks through the gate. Peace and blessings. You are magnificent. How you feeling? Yeah. If you are new to our community, each week I offer what we have come to acknowledge as a life practice, and that has been an evolution of what used to be called homework. But I'm so grateful to Reverend William for acknowledging that, it should be a life practice and it doesn't have to just be homework. But this week, what I would like us all to do is this, and this is not just this week, but to continue on. Commit to noticing each time you begin to explain why something cannot change or be different in your life. Start noticing. What are you saying about your life? Oh, that's not possible. I can't do that. Not for me, right? Commit to noticing each time you begin to explain why something cannot change or be different in your life. Take a pause in that realization. And then replace the thought of limitation by answering this question. What is possible in this? What is possible in this? And see what divine idea bubbles up through you. That's the life practice.